Entering the Pat Mayo Experience.
Pat Mayo Experience. Pat Mayo Experience. Pat Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by DraftKings 2022 Fantasy Football Wide Receiver Rankings by tier. We've already done part one. This is now part two. You missed part one. No shame in that. Just hit the description. The link is down there. We covered tiers 1, 2, and 3, the top tiers at wide receiver for the fantasy football rankings this season. Part 1 of the running backs top tiers is already out as well with Jake Seal. You can find that down in the description or up on the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, all of the popular podcast sites. You can get those episodes. They're available now. So go check them out after you watch or listen to this show. Either way, if you want to make your own projections or just check out someone else's projections completely free, runthesims.com has that for you. The early bird package for both the betting and daily fantasy, the optimizer, the prize picks, everything like that, that is all available right now to the early bird special. And if you use discount code MAYO, you get an additional 10% off. So that's the cheapest it's going to be all year, under $200 for the NFL season at runthesims.com. But if it is just the season-long projections you're looking for, those are completely free, so go check it out right now. Mike Leone from Establish the Run is back to continue our conversation about this. Mike, have you smashed the like button to this episode yet?
I have not, but I'm going to. It's the first thing I'm going to do once I get off this recording.
Well, the show won't be out for like another day, so you have to come back, give me that view, give me that like, and sub to Mayo Media Network on the YouTubes while you're at it. Here's what we came up with for the top 10 rankings at wide receiver for 2022. Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, CeeDee Lamb, Stefon Diggs, T. Higgins, A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill, and Keenan Allen. Just looking at that last year, I'm just like, ugh, do I really feel that way? And we ended with Debo. We don't have Debo ranked yet, but we had a discussion about Debo Samuel. So if you want to hear more about Debo, you can go back to the end of part 1. Everything's time-coded, so it's easy to find. That leaves us with a glut of names. And now, I think you could talk to most people, and if you had to rank the top 10 wide receivers for the year, they would probably give you 8 or 9 of exactly the same names. Just how it's going to go. So we're talking about projections. We're talking about how these guys are actually ranked, but I don't know what to do with the second tier because I have my favorites of, I don't want to say the safe guys, but like the safe half-point, full-point PPR guys like Deontay Johnson. I think that Jalen Waddle fits into that mix. Brendan Cooks, Terry McLaurin are all there. Then you have players like Gabriel Davis and Michael Pittman who just seem to be skyrocketing up draft boards. Make your case. Are there any of those names that you would list above Debo Samuel? Because as people know, I'm just a bit wishy-washy on Debo this year. I just don't trust his floor whatsoever. It feels like there might not be... I find it very unlikely that he finishes the year at wide receiver 11. It's like wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 32 for him.
I think the floor might be a little bit better than you're giving him credit for because like he's one of the only wide receivers the last decade that's been over 2 yards per route run in all 3 of his seasons. And I think that just that type of talent and what he can do provides him with a better floor than you would expect. I know there's some concerns in terms of, the target tree growing now that Brandon Ayuk isn't in the doghouse and how much pass volume is there even going to be, period, with Trey Lance at the helm instead of Jimmy Garoppolo. But there wasn't a lot of pass volume last year either. So I think we've dropped him about as far as we can drop him, where I think he has to be slotted in right now after the 3 tiers that we did in the last episode.
Okay, so let's start tier 4. Debo is now next at the beginning of tier 4 in the rankings. That was an easy one. I mean, we're flying through this already. We're at a much better pace than episode 1
to last.
Of this 10-part series of the wide receiver rankings. Excuse me. Mike, when you have kids, they bring everything home and you're just coughing nonstop. Oh. It's crazy.
Every other week they spend a week sick, a week not sick, and then the next week they're sick again. And I only have 1 kid.
Yeah, I have 2. So they just kind of alternate the sickness, and my wife and I are just sick the entire time. So would you say, let's start with Michael Pittman, because I'm not as sold on this like breakout campaign that everyone is. That doesn't mean he shouldn't be a part of this tier, because I find that sometimes like people will talk in hyperbole about, oh, this is the player's upside. Here's this massive breakout. And when you go through your rankings, it's like, yeah, that's about where he should be. and that's about where he's being drafted. Yet people are talking about him like he's like the league winner this year. I don't know if I necessarily see that from Michael Pittman. Like, I think I'd rather have Deontay Johnson and Jalen Waddle and DJ Moore and Brennan Cooks. Like, I think he's in with those guys, but I think he's behind those guys.
Yeah, I think he's being drafted at a point where the upside is kind of sucked out from him already. It's going to be tough to profit at that pick, and I generally want guys with a higher ceiling. So, looking at this offense, they're not going to throw very much. They're going to throw more than last year, going from Carson Wentz to Matt Ryan, and just the way things worked out. Frank Reich has talked about it, but throwing more from last year is still one of the lowest pass rates in the entire league. And I know the target competition isn't there. Do certainly expect him to be around a 25% target share. The question, I guess, is does he make the leap to becoming a Devontae Adams type where he's getting a 30+% target share? Because if he's around 25%, it's just going to be super difficult for him to hit a huge ceiling the way this offense operates, not running a ton of plays, having a low pass rate. And I think, at this point, he's being drafted really pretty much towards his ceiling.
He is being drafted in the neighborhood of other receivers, such as with being picked number 30 right now in DraftKings. Keenan Allen is 26, A.J. Brown is 28, T. Higgins is 29, Michael Pittman is number 30. And like Mike Williams, for example, is number 31 overall going in these drafts, also at wide receiver, obviously. But because that's DraftKings best ball drafts, I think a lot of that has to do with people going Herbert, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. That's inflating the value of Mike Williams, where in redraft leagues, that's probably not going to be so much the case, because if you've already got Keenan Allen or Herbert, he's a priority target, so you have to go get him at that spot. The Michael Pittman at 30 isn't like, oh man, I already have Matt Ryan, I need to get Michael Pittman as well to really fill out these Colts stacks. No, he's just independently going at number 30, and I feel like that's going to stick. That seems too high for me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. He's probably not going to burn you too much there, but I don't see the ceiling. Even Mike Williams, like even taking the best ball aspect out of it, I see a ceiling that he can achieve that Michael Pittman can't achieve, and there's, if Keenan Allen falls off or gets hurt, then all of a sudden more targets are opening up for Mike Williams, who did for a stretch last year match Keenan Allen to start the year. It didn't last, and we can't expect them to be right with Keenan Allen in terms of target share to start the year. But a Mike Williams target's more valuable than a Keenan Allen target. I mean, Mike Williams can get down the field. He's playing with, a more talented quarterback than Michael Pittman is playing with. He's playing in an offense that's way more fantasy friendly. They're going to be among the league leaders in plays per game. They're going to have a positive pass rate over expectation. So, there's a ceiling there that Pittman can achieve. Of course, Pittman's going to beat him out in terms of base target share. That's going to give him a better floor and a better median outcome.
4 comparables going around that point in drafts overall from all positions. Nick Chubb, 25, Javonte Williams, 27, James Conner, 32, Travis Etienne at number 33. And the one that I like, here's just a very easy example. If I had picked number 30 and my 2 choices were Michael Pittman or Kyle Pitts, I would take Kyle Pitts at number 34 over taking Michael Pittman at number 30. Like I get why they're going close in drafts, but if we want to talk about upside plus position scarcity, I just don't see why it wouldn't be Pitts.
Yeah, and it also depends, what type of league format you're drafting. DraftKings best ball, maybe you just want to build out a bit more wide receiver depth. But if I'm in a casual league where I think I'm smarter than most of my friends, or you think you're smarter than most of your friends, and you can beat them on pure rankings, throughout the draft, you can't replicate an elite onesie position. Like you can't manufacture that with like, Mike Gesicki late or Irv Smith late. Like those guys could be fine, but you're ceding an advantage at the position. Whereas at wide receiver, we can find some guys, Gabriel Davis, maybe but we can find some guy, your guy, Brandon Cooks, that go a couple rounds later that could match Michael Pittman. Whereas at tight end, you're not really finding that. So I'm pretty pro if it's close going to the onesie position, especially if it's just like a redraft managed home league.
It's really funny that when we talk about redraft leagues, for years it's been, hey, let's just punt quarterback. You can take a quarterback whenever. You don't need to take a bench quarterback because you can just pick one up every single week. And obviously, each different league has different rules. So maybe it is advantageous to carry 2. And this isn't, I'm not talking about Superflex here. I'm talking about 1 quarterback league. No 2 quarterback, no Superflex, none of that stuff. But you just find, like you said, the onesie position where it does seem like at tight end, you want to reach on a tight end to fill that one spot where still you can still just wait on quarterback if you really wanted to, which is just kind of funny to think about. I guess it's just because there are so many good quarterbacks versus good tight ends.
Yeah. I actually like getting, I think you should be getting an elite onesie at one of the two positions. I think quarterback, it's too early in round 3. The opportunity cost is just too high, especially compared to the guys you can get a few rounds later. But the first 6-7 rounds, I like getting a quarterback a lot more than I have previously. Saw a tweet from Chris Towers that I think it was something around quarterbacks drafted outside the top 12, comprised like 50% of QB1 weeks, from, I think it was like the 4 or 5 years prior to the last couple of seasons. And then the last couple of seasons, that percentage has dropped to 33%. So these quarterbacks are starting to separate in a more meaningful way and a more predictable way. TJ Hernandez also had some good data on this last season, but the guys that are being drafted in the top 12, Pat, are like really likely to be in the top 12 quarterbacks. You're not finding a lot of guys late that can match that upside. And it's because the archetypes are changing, where we're seeing quarterbacks that have, either the dual upside in terms of rushing and passing, even guys that are just straight rushers. Like, God, I was such a Tyrod Taylor fan a handful of years ago, but he wouldn't be anywhere close to the top 12 now, even with his rushing ability, because you need both. And then you get other guys like Tom Brady that their teams score a ton of points, but they just keep throwing no matter what. Like, we get these teams that are a bit smarter in terms of understanding they can keep passing no matter what. So I do like getting an elite quarterback if I can, within reason. I think round 3 is too early, but you start getting into rounds 5, 6, I start to see it.
Well, right now, quarterbacks off the board. Josh Allen's going around pick 21, Mahomes around pick number 30, Herbert 35, and then you're into Lamar and Joe Burrow 53 and 54. I worry about that Burrow number. That's the first one of those that I don't know if I wouldn't take Mahomes at number 30. I'd take Kyle Pitts instead. I would lean elite tight end over elite quarterback at the top of any sort of fantasy football draft. Be it, in best ball it's different because you're trying to build out stacks, but in a redraft league, that's a no-brainer for me. But Burrow seems to be the first one of those numbers that legitimately does not make any sense to me. Like, why is Burrow a better fantasy quarterback than Kyler 10 picks later or Jalen Hurts 15 picks later? I'd wager Jalen Hurts probably finishes with more fantasy points.
Yeah, I think Joe Burrow's, he's got to be QB7 or later, and I think QB7's as high as he should be drafted.
And that's probably a good spot, but like, why is Matt Stafford going 25 picks after Joe Burrow? Don't they do exactly the same thing?
Yeah, I think they're very similar. I think Burrow, you could talk yourself into a bit more upside in that you could maybe see the offense evolve to a point where they're throwing more frequently. We saw it at times last year, but overall, I'm in agreement with you. They're very similar. They're guys that you're going to need to be very efficient throwing the ball because they're not going to be huge pass volume guys, and they're also not going to run a ton. I think Burrow probably runs a little bit more than Stafford, especially another year removed from that ACL injury, but it's still not, it's not making a huge dent into his fantasy score. So there's no way, in my opinion, you can take Burrow over Hurts or over Kyler, over Lamar. Those three quarterbacks could be the overall QB1. And Burrow, it would just take an epic, passing season to get there. And it's hard to bet on that on a team that has the talent, but also has a coaching staff that was pretty boring, pretty average, all things considered, in terms of play calling last year.
Burrow at pick 54 or Tom Brady at pick 100? I get the people like, oh, Brady's old. Whatever.
That's Brady. Yeah, that's Brady. You got to be going Brady, I think, there.
I would agree. Like, Dak is even going like 30 picks later, which,
yeah, that's a tier. I think it's a tier drop off, and maybe Burrow's the first of the next tier, but he's in that. He's closer. I think he should be closer to Dak than he should be to Hurts and Herbert and Kyler.
What would you say the per game gap this year will be between Joe Burrow and Derek Carr?
Man,
because you'd have to think the Raiders throw a little bit more this year, right? With McDaniels.
Yeah, we're pretty high on the Raiders, which includes being, somewhat high on Derek Carr. We have him as QB 13. We have him like 2 rounds after Burrow. So I don't know, like 1.5 fantasy points per game, maybe something like that.
Yeah, I think it's worth waiting.
I'm spitballing though. I'm not.
No, that's fair. I think my point is just trying to be. I think it's worth waiting the 70 picks for 1.5 points per game.
Yeah, Burrow is a guy that right now I'm only taking on DraftKings Best Ball if I've started with Chase and T and I really am like pushing the stack. But as an individual play in a vacuum, he's one of the worst quarterback values among the top quarterbacks.
Because as you mentioned, his path to be the number one overall guy, it's not that it's not there. We just saw Brady finish as the number one quarterback 2 years ago. It's possible that guys that don't run the ball, that they have to have such a significant outlier upside here. And like you said, that the Bucs continue to pass over expectation and the Bengals just don't.
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, you could make a compelling argument. I mean, we have Brady behind Burrow, but I think they're probably pretty similar, like when it's all said and done, where Brady maybe even has a little bit of an edge over Burrow because at least you're going to get tons and tons of pass volume and you're probably going to get the team scoring more points. And when you're looking at pure passers, like those are the two things that matter the most. Burrow's definitely got an edge, especially with like Godwin hurt and Gronk retiring. I think Burrow's got an edge in the youth and the upside of the receivers with T Higgins and Jamar Chase, but it's not like, Brady's going to get Godwin at some point. He's got Mike Evans. So yeah, you're going to need like a 45 passing touchdown season from Burrow, 45 to 50 to really get there. And like you said, it can happen, but that's not the type of bet I want to make.
Looking at the medium projections from runthesims.com right now, it has Joe Burrow at quarterback number 7 in fantasy points, but that is with him leading the league in passing yards. And still, that puts him 4 points ahead of Kyler Murray and 7 points ahead of Tom Brady. Two guys going significantly after him at the moment. Although, this is how we only ended up ranking 10 wide receivers last show, by the way. It was just dividing off into talking about this, but now I'm into this. I think people will be into this as well. I'm worried about Kyler as a fantasy asset because he is at his best. I mean, obviously earlier in the year before he's banged up every single season, but even last year, we didn't get the rushing we wanted out of him. We got the rushing touchdowns early when he kept calling his own name near the goal line, but it reminded me more of like a vintage, even Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson type rushing season where he started to rush only when he needed a first down. There weren't a lot of designed plays for him to run, especially later on in the year, and that just crippled his fantasy value.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want the huge rushing upside, but I think he's always going to be a threat by the goal line, and the team should be pretty good in terms of scoring. And I mean, still 423 yards in 14 games with 5 touchdowns. Hopefully he can stay fully healthy for a full season. And I mean, we saw what he did 2 years ago, so I don't think you can completely discount what he did 2 years ago. You're not expecting that as the base, but a guy who can run for 800 yards and double-digit touchdowns, like that gives you that huge ceiling. And what's great about Kyler and some of these guys is they're not overly reliant on that. In some ways, Kyler's like, you can kind of get the Dak passing numbers, a little bit more rushing upside. So I'm still pretty into Kyler.
What if I told you that one of those guys did just that and it was rush for 800 yards and double-digit touchdowns? Just say that's this mystical number that we're talking about right now. The quarterbacks that could get there, who is more likely, Jalen Hurts or Kyler Murray?
Jalen Hurts.
I would agree. Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray?
Lamar. I'm huge. I think Lamar should be the QB2. I think he's the best value right now of the elite quarterbacks.
Josh Allen or Kyler Murray?
I think that one's really close. I actually think that might be Kyler, but I think that one's really close.
Justin Fields or Kyler Murray? See, we're having real
Kyler.
We go Kyler. Okay, Trey Lance or Kyler Murray?
Lance.
See, I think it's Lance too. Like I think Lance is a better fantasy pick this year than Kyler Murray based on where they're going.
But I think what's nice about Kyler though, especially compared to Fields and Lance, I think the passing component of things is just going to be on a different level than those guys. I mean, Kyler just, he threw for 3,800 yards in 14 games. I think he can go over 4K yards. I don't know how often like Justin Fields is hitting 4K yards passing.
Well, we have the median at 3,700 yards, assuming the full 17 games of Justin Fields this year. We do have Trey Lance at 4,200. But we have the rushing we have the rushing below Kyler Murray, which I disagree with completely, and the passing above Kyler Murray. I'd probably swap those two things. Like Trey Lance, 100 rushes for. So. I mean, I think that's baking in that he's. I don't think that's for a full 17 games. Like when you do the median projection, that he either loses his job or gets hurt or something like that. But you're not drafting Trey Lance under the assumption that he's going to get hurt or lose his job, or else you wouldn't draft him to begin with. So if you are drafting him and projecting him out over 17 games, like 515 rushing yards seems super low. Like he could have double that.
Yeah, I think he's going to run a ton. I mean, between designed runs and then scrambles. Yeah, Lance is an incredible value. He's starting to get more expensive, but he's, like you said, if you're playing for the ceiling there, Lance is a really good bet to beat his ADP if he's starting, 15-ish games. And
that ties back into the Debo thing that we talked about a little bit. What does the Debo affect? I mean, maybe it's helpful that it pushes him back out to receiver more. There are fewer carries out of the backfield because there are fewer running opportunities now with Trey Lance running the ball far more often than Jimmy G was ever going to run the ball, that those opportunities have now evaporated where he did so much of his scoring last year. And as I have said, I would just prefer that Debo be an outside receiver, be a slot receiver, maybe carry the ball twice a game on a reverse, line him up in the backfield for misdirection, whatever it may be. But if we're now talking about a quarterback who's likely going to call his own name around the goal line and run the ball 7 to 12 times a game, maybe more, those are just fewer opportunities to go around.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where offenses like San Francisco are always tough to digest from a fantasy perspective, because I think individually you can make huge ceiling cases for a lot of guys, but then, collectively it's going to be hard for all of them to get there and to match their ADP. Denver's one like that for me, Philly to an extent, where, just because of the way the play calling is, it's going to be tough for all those guys to get there. But at the same time, the scoring upside on these offenses, the efficiency upside on these offenses is really huge. And I have a tough time with them, just knowing like at what point do you let go and just say, okay, that, this ADP is too rich, even though the upside's there, because we know in the median case, there's going to be some struggles.
So Michael Pittman is here. Mike Williams, we've discussed both of them. I think that I would have McLaurin and Cooks for sure over both those guys. I bet you disagree.
Yeah, I do disagree with that. I'm down on Cooks relative to you for sure.
As you were last year and lost money because of it.
As I was last year and lost money on it. I'm probably too low on Cooks, but I think we're starting to get Cooks kind of like in the Pittman level where I just don't see any upside beyond it. I suppose we have a little bit more evidence that we could see, this massive target share from Cooks. We saw it at the beginning of last year, but it was somewhat more tame over the second half of the season. And I guess that, that's sort of what I'm using to prognosticate going forward. And McLaurin, man, I think Carson Wentz is like low key really bad. I think McLaurin's, I don't think you could make a case that his target share is a little bit more stable, a little bit safer with Carson Wentz, who just fed Michael Pittman, 25.4% target share on average over the course of last season. But, he's someone that's not great in the locker room. The team could maybe be worse because of that. He's someone who, from an efficiency standpoint, Taylor Heineke even provided a bit more upside in the passing game than Carson Wentz did, even if it came with a bit more volatility. So, I have a tough time with this range of wide receivers in general. The guy we haven't talked about too much that I put ahead of all these guys is DJ Moore, which is probably no surprise because I've always been a DJ Moore stan, but he's exceeded 1,150 yards 3 straight seasons, does it like clockwork, does it, no matter how the offense is running, no matter how bad the QB play is. And I think there's probably a season in there where just 1 year he runs hot on touchdowns. And we're looking at him completely differently than we are now because he's only scored 4 touchdowns each of the last 3 seasons.
This is the wide receiver range right now of where they're going overall. Deontay Johnson at 44, DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, Allen Robinson, Gabriel Davis. They go back to back to back to back to back in drafts at the moment. I mean, I don't hate that order because we'll circle back to Deontay Johnson, who I probably will have at the very top of this tier. I didn't consider Allen Robinson in this tier though. Like all the other guys, I think you make a pretty viable case for. I get Allen Robinson's addition in here, but that just feels like, oh, he finally has a guy throwing him the ball. And that's the one good thing about McLaurin is no matter how shitty Carson Wentz is, how much shittier could he be than all the other Washington quarterbacks who've ever thrown him a ball?
Yeah, that him and DJ Moore kind of both have that going for them where but like it can't get too much worse than last year. So in some ways, we've already seen them succeed in that scenario. So it makes us feel a little bit better about the floor and then better about the ceiling if the quarterback play this year just happens to be better than we anticipate, which we don't anticipate it being well. I'm interested / glad to hear that you don't have Allen Robinson this tier. He's someone at ETR we've been much lower on than the market and trying to make the numbers work and see what the market is seeing. I think you really you can't totally discount last year when Darnell Mooney was earning more targets than him, right? Like
he was hurt. I actually think it could have been him not wanting to come back to a terrible Bears team, but it seemed like, and we've seen this in a bunch of sports now, where when guys get COVID, some guys come back, they're fine. It seemed like he legitimately struggled for 2 months after having COVID.
Yeah, and I mean maybe, but I'm just looking at his age and his seasons, and I'm concerned with an age 28 season that looks really, really bad, even with the health factors and the quarterback factors and the coaching factors. And then you go to a team where he's blocked from a really high end target share, and the team's not going to throw a ton. I do see the path to, let's say Cooper Kupp gets hurt, and now all of a sudden Allen Robinson could have a massive season. And those are the types of things we should be thinking about because chaos unfolds over the course of a year. But I think even weighting that upside case with the median case, he falls short of this tier. I don't know. I'm just not quite seeing it with Robinson the way the market is.
If I told you that Allen Robinson garnered an 18% share of the targets in this Rams offense and had a catch rate of 65%, where do you think that would put him out in terms of projections overall amongst wide receivers? With a 60% pass rate from the Rams.
Yeah, 18% target share. And I mean, that's close to what we have. And we have him. We have the ADP tied in a little bit just to, give some respect to the market. But we have him more like wide receiver 26-ish instead of the wide receiver 21 that he's going. So I would say that would put him around, if you're not making the ADP, around wide receiver 30.
So by the median projections that we have in place at Run the Sims right now, I think we're going to be the lowest on Allen Robinson of anyone around. And this kind of jives with what I'm going with. And we can even artificially put them up, put them down. You can customize anything you want. If you think these are stupid, just go in, use your email, sign up, completely free, go adjust this. And maybe it's the touchdown market share that we're way too low on. We have it at 12% because you have Cooper Kupp, you have Cam Akers. And maybe he just takes over and has one of these ridiculous 16 touchdown seasons. It takes away from Kupp. It takes away from Van Jefferson. And that's kind of the end of the story with him. Higbee doesn't do anything. They don't run the ball a ton when they get inside the 5-yard line, which if they're not throwing to Cooper Kupp, they tend to do a lot of the time. But those medium projections give him wide receiver 62 status this year.
62. Wow. I was way off. But I think we've talked about this. I think we're like slightly more conservative on a base across the board. So comparing to other receivers, but we have him kind of similar to what you do, like expecting a target share in the high teens. And you start to look at the way this offense operates. Like Cooper Kupp's going to see a huge target share. We have him, lower than last year, and it still just doesn't leave a ton of room. If you think this team re-signs Odell and he plays down the stretch, that's a factor. They're going to play a third wide receiver. Van Jefferson's going to get a little bit while at least the beginning of the season, and they're going to use Higbee in the passing game. So it's tough for a team that, doesn't throw a ton. Again, they're kind of like the Bengals a little bit in terms of their play calling, where it's not bad, but it's just like they're running around the league average amount in plays. They're running, maybe a little bit higher than expected in terms of pass rate. I guess we do have the pass rate a little bit higher than
I absolutely fucked that up because I went and made the manual adjustment to 60%, but I accidentally put in 60% rushing rate instead of passing rate. That's why he was wide receiver 60 something. He's wide receiver 37. Okay. That makes more sense.
Okay, I was closer then with my my wide receiver 30. Yes.
I guess here's my question. Why is Allen Robinson at pick 48 a must-have, according to people who are drafting, and Van Jefferson's pick number 143?
Well, I think we've just seen enough from Van Jefferson to know the talent isn't there. And with Allen Robinson, it's kind of like
there?
people like, yeah, it's kind of like me with Juju, admittedly, you're dreaming a little bit on something you have that is a little bit more tangible that you have seen before. Whereas, Van Jefferson, there's just such a low chance that he's actually really good at this point in his career. It's so low. I think it's,
why are we thinking that Van Jefferson is terrible? Van Jefferson's been pretty good over the course of his career. He's been behind Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, and then Odell in this offense.
He's been okay. I mean, he's not going to earn a target share like Allen Robinson could. Like I don't think there's a world where Van Jefferson's earning 25 to 28% of Matthew Stafford's targets, whereas
I don't see that with Allen
could
Robinson. No, that's not going to happen. If Cooper Kupp dies, then maybe Allen Robinson can get up there.
But that matters.
Sure, but if I gave you a percentage right now, how many times out of 100 does Allen Robinson beat Van Jefferson in fantasy scoring for the season?
80.
80? Really? You'd say 4 out of 5 times.
70, maybe 70, maybe 70.
So we're shrinking that down a little bit. I don't think it's I don't think it's 100 points of ADP difference.
It's not, but so these outcomes where it's like unlikely that Cooper Kupp dies, but like what happens in those outcomes matters. First of all, I don't think.
Sure, but we're also.
I think Allen Robinson is going too high. He's the type of guy I would really like if he was going round 7, where I could be like, okay, he's like not going to kill you as is. And then if Cooper Kupp dies, you hit a league winner. Like that's the sort of bet I would rather make on Allen Robinson. So I think he's going too early, but I do think that, he's meaningfully better than Van Jefferson, or at least has meaningfully more upside.
Another name I want to throw into this tier that I think we discussed a little bit in part 1, I've discussed a few times on the show already, is how much I like Amari Cooper this year. So I'm throwing him into this mix, and that's not where he is being drafted whatsoever. He's a guy that you could probably wait on for a round or two, or if you want to go get him, go up a round to go get him. And I don't care if it's Jacoby Brissett for all 17 games. People can talk about Mart Bell, the rookie, all they want in Cleveland, and Njoku breakout season. There's one guy there, he's going to get... It's the same theory as the Brandon Cooks theory. Like, there's one guy who might get 35% of his team targets, even if they do run a ton. It's Amari Cooper, who's a good player.
Yeah, I think once the ADP starts getting him more like wide receiver 30-ish, at that point, he's a really good value. I think I'm not as high on him as you. I don't think he should be in this tier, but I think he could lead off the next tier or be, right in that next tier after.
Okay. I would much prefer him over Allen Robinson. Let's put it that way. So it seems like we've condensed this tier down. I'll take out Amari Cooper from this tier, although I might put him back in because he's my guy. He's being drafted very near DK Metcalf at this point. And the issue with Metcalf, I think, as you kind of stated on the last show, it's not that Metcalf is an inherently bad pick. It's that Lockett is just so much better of a pick right now.
Yeah, and it depends where the ADP is. The last ADP we pulled from DraftKings, which might be a little bit old now, had Metcalf at wide receiver 28. And that starts to become a lot more reasonable. He started the year basically as like wide receiver 16, which was insane to me.
Why is that insane though? Honestly,
wide receiver 16 for DK Metcalf.
Yeah. You have a team with a bad defense that's probably going to have to throw, even though they don't want to throw.
They're not gonna throw, even though it's going to be like Jeff Fisher. Like they're just going to stay within 2 scores. They're not going to throw, even though they have to throw. They're going to go at a super slow pace. We have them running 4 more plays per game than they did last year, and they're still dead last in the NFL on our projections by 1 play per game. The quarterback play, I think, is underestimated. Like how severe that drop off is. And what was DK Metcalf last year? Like he barely, in a full season where he was basically healthy the whole year, he barely got to wide receiver 16.
Okay, so he's not on this tier then. The other 2 names that we have not discussed as of yet, Deontay Johnson and Jalen Waddle. So we have Tyreek Hill ranked at number 10. Number 10, wide receiver number 10, which I do think is lower than market right now. And I think we've had this discussion. Let's see where you're at right now. Jalen Waddle versus Tyreek Hill fantasy points. Who scores more? How many? What percentage of the time?
I think Jalen Waddle will outscore Tyreek Hill more times than Hill outscores Waddle.
Really?
Boom. This is my hot take. So the ETR ranks, that are more the group consensus have Tyreek Hill ahead of Jalen Waddle. And I think that can also, both these things can be true, where when Tyreek Hill hits his ceiling case, it's just higher because he's such a dynamic playmaker, which we've seen, regardless of the quarterback play, like Tyreek Hill clearly can make things happen, has this huge ceiling. But I honestly wouldn't be shocked, Pat, if Waddle out targeted Tyreek Hill, and he's going to have a higher catch rate than Tyreek Hill. So from a median perspective, if you're getting as many or more targets and you have a higher catch rate, like your median outcome is probably going to be better, just because there's a little bit more variance to the playmaking with Tyreek Hill, a little bit more dependency on the big plays and the volatile touchdowns, which we're playing that fantasy game to win. Those things matter in fantasy, which leads into Hill being ranked ahead of Jalen Waddle. But ultimately, I'm a really big fan of Waddle. Just a super encouraging rookie season for a guy who had a ton of draft capital. And I think the thing that held him back last year was there was just no yak with a lot of this ADOT stuff, that he was getting really high catch rate. I think if they can use him in a similar fashion this year in an offense that has Tyreek Hill to stretch the field and a coach that is coming from an offense in San Francisco where they're just absolute yak monsters and yak kings, Waddle could have a really, really impressive season. He's probably my favorite pick at the 3-4 turn right now.
So you're breaking away from the consensus and going out on your own in terms of Jalen Waddle is what you're saying.
Once in a while, I can't just be like lukewarm, like, oh, you got to take him around ADP. So yeah, that's my hot take. Give me Jalen Waddle.
All right. So that means should we bump up Jalen Waddle to the top of this tier, or would you prefer DJ Moore or Deontay Johnson?
I would have Waddle at the top of the tier. But I think Waddle and DJ Moore are my two favorites of this tier. And then I think it gets pretty muddied. There's one guy we didn't talk about that I think belongs in this tier at the back end. Maybe start the next tier.
Can I make my guess on who it is? And I don't agree with it if it's this person, but is it Hollywood Brown?
Yes.
Okay.
It is Hollywood Brown. I think maybe start at the next tier though. I think we could go start. I think we can put him next tier, but I don't like. I'd take Hollywood over Amari Cooper.
Let's bet you on that. We were looking for the other bet. There's the bet because I was the fact that you like your side so much and I like my side so much. This is the perfect bet. Even money, $100. Amari Cooper outscores Hollywood Brown in fantasy football 2022. I'm gonna rack this up to 4-0 against you here soon.
What was the Juju? Was it Juju Cooks?
Yeah.
Was it?
Juju
Did we
Cooks.
double down on that? Cooks. Okay. Whew, let's do it.
I like
At least
it.
I don't have money on Chenault this year.
It's funny. I saw Davis talking about this on Twitter. Davis is a good barometer of this type of situation because no one loved Chenault more than Davis loved Chenault. You guys all love Chenault, but Davis was really pounding that wagon with these stats he was finding and really making the case. You know who he's doing that to right now?
Is it Sky Moore?
No, it's Gabriel Davis.
Oh, I know he is, but
That doesn't Gabe Davis bad year this year. Doesn't that just reek of Chenault? And I don't mean like bad year as bad as Chenault had, but like bad year where he's wide receiver 33 or something like that.
yeah. But if you could say if his bad year is wide receiver 33, he's an absolute smash because the ceiling's so huge. So I think
if he's wide receiver 33, he was so good because he sucked, but he could have been good.
I'm just saying, like, if you're telling me that's the downside, like, I'm in. Because the difference between him and Chenault, okay, Chenault was from the very beginning a guy that we liked as a prospect, just kind of little group think like, oh, we're smart. Like, this is a good prospect. He had better draft, he had this decent draft capital. And like, we wanted Chenault to be a thing. Gabriel Davis has some similarities in that he was a bit of an analytics darling as a prospect, but he's actually done a lot more stuff at the NFL level than Laviska Shenault has done. And he's in a much better contextual position than Laviska Shenault was ever in. And the coaching staff, I think, has more faith and support in Gabriel Davis than, Laviska Shenault ever had. So I think Gabriel Davis I get where if you're just looking at the total numbers, it looks like a huge leap. It's a guy who's literally caught 35 balls each of his first 2 seasons. And we're drafting a guy who caught 35 balls in each of he's going to need to at least double that to come close to paying off his ADP. But I think if you look at the way things developed last season, once all the guys were healthy for the playoff run, including Manny Sanders and Cole Beasley, it was Gabriel Davis playing 100% of the team's offensive snaps in that first playoff game against New England. That went a little bit unseen just because of the way that game unfolded, where they just smashed New England. And then same thing, Kansas City. He's clearly the team's number 2 wide receiver, has one of the greatest wide receiver playoff games of all time. And now we're heading into a season where they have not replaced Manny Sanders on the outside. They brought in Jamison Crowder to replace Cole Beasley. There's not competition here. The opportunity is going to be there. I think the talent's there. I think it's a completely different situation than the Chenault one.
Sure. I just meant about how much you guys just want something to happen. And it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah. I'm trying to be better about that. There's a point at which cost always matters, I think, is the big thing. And I think sometimes as a group, when we have these players that we really like in a vacuum, we lose sight of, at the end of the day, the biggest part of measuring the expected value of a draft pick is, what the opportunity cost was. Like, who else could you have taken? And sometimes we just zone in on certain players and get blinded between other players that are better bets just because we don't have that attachment to the player.
It's actually funny. The players going around Gabriel Davis, the fact that George Kittle is going 1 pick after, again, just give me the tight end in that sort of situation. Lamar Jackson's going 2 picks later. I don't think I'd splurge on a quarterback that highly. I would prefer Lamar Jackson. It's the guys like Ray, like I said, Allen Robinson is now currently going ahead of Gabriel Davis at 47. Gabriel Davis is 48 in drafts. But once you drop back to, I like Josh Jacobs. I like Brendan Cooks. I like Amari Cooper. I like Amon-Ra St. Brown. I probably don't like St. Brown more than Davis, but I think that they're very much in the same neighborhood. So I think that there's just, he should be going 10 to 12 picks later for me to even consider him. And even 10 to 12 picks later, I still like some of those other guys more than him anyway. But there does seem to be this little bit of a dead zone here amongst just guys I don't like at this price.
I think what's nice if you're playing in a home league is that Gabriel Davis is not, I don't think, unless you're playing in home leagues in Buffalo, going to be nearly as expensive as he is in these best ball leagues, because the type of fantasy players that are playing these best ball leagues, as you kind of noted, they're Gabriel Davis stands. So I think he will be going, around later in most of those managed leagues, but I'm still into him in basketball. Just I think the ceiling's absolutely massive, but I like Amon-Ra St. Brown more. I'm really high on Amon-Ra St. Brown.
You like him more than Gabriel Davis, really?
DraftKings full PPR scoring, I think Amon-Ra can be an absolute monster. I think I always go on this tangent, so I hate to be repetitive, but there are situations where I feel like in years past we would have totally overrated a stretch like he had, and now the fantasy industry is almost done a 180, and sometimes we're not appreciative enough or undervaluing a stretch like he had. Like, it was a hot stretch to end the season, but Pat, we're talking, from week 13 on, 29% target share, 31%, 42%, 31%, 30%, 31%. Just the fact that you had that in your range of outcomes, obviously not expecting that as base, but that's a 6-week stretch in which his average target share was 32.5%. That's insane. And he was doing stuff with those targets too. And he was also, making some plays on the ground, which is just a good sign that a player is talented. I think this offense as a whole is going to provide him with more target competition this year, but I think it's going to be better. I think the Lions could be sneaky good and sneaky fun on offense, and that should, help solidify the floor of everybody, even if it takes a little bit away from that base ceiling. And again, still factoring in, we know it's possible he can have a stretch where he earns over 30% of targets because he did it, and he did it successfully.
What do you suppose the timeline on Jameson Williams is?
Man, I think he's got to miss half the season. And the Jameson Williams thing is tough to me.
Does DJ Chark have anything left in the tank?
I hope so. I think there's enough targets to go around that I actually want some of these guys to play and be good because I think it helps the offense overall, especially when you're talking a shorter A-dot guy and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, I want the field stretchers in DJ Chark and Jameis Williams to be out there. I want them playing. I think that's good for Amon-Ra St. Brown to an extent.
So basically, the Amon-Ra St. Brown great season that you're looking for is like a vintage Julian Edelman, Wes Welker type season, but with like more explosive power to the end zone from 50 yards out.
Yeah, I think it's maybe somewhere between that type of season and the Debo season last year. Maybe not last year, because last year his yards per catch was just so high. But I think he could be pretty efficient, and he can succeed and just have a ton of yak like Debo has.
Our projections don't like Deontay Johnson whatsoever. We have him for 80 catches and 848 yards on 129 targets. Just, if he's going to have 130 targets this season, it would strike me as almost impossible he'd be below 1,000 yards.
I think I'm really lukewarm on Deontay Johnson. We have him for 968 yards off of 87 catches. I think we have him for 139 targets. So right around the 1,000-yard season, but on about half a target more per game, roughly. This is a weird one for me because I think Ben Roethlisberger was so bad, and there's some upside in any offense that shifts from a quarterback that's just absolutely horrific to basically anybody else. That said, I'm not exactly a huge fan of Pickett or Mitch Trubisky, and I also wonder if, as bad as Ben Roethlisberger was, it might not have been that bad for Deontay Johnson from a fantasy perspective.
Okay, so here's the question: Is it better or worse that Ben has gone for Deontay Johnson? Is even like, I think no matter if it's Pickett or if it's Trubisky, it's an upgrade from what we saw from Ben last year. How much? I have no idea. But will they lock into Deontay Johnson as much as Ben did? Because that's where Ben went.
Right.
But Deontay Johnson had 170 targets last year, 169 for 1,161 yards. Drop that down to, like, could he do that again? Like, is it that Ben loved Deontay Johnson so much, or was Deontay Johnson just the only guy open on the field and they haven't brought in anyone really new to replace him, so he's still going to be the only guy open on the field?
Yeah, and for me, like, ultimately, I guess I just have it like as a wash, whereas I'm definitely, like, I'm more excited for Chase Claypool and Juju Smith-Schuster's quarterback upgrades because of how they were utilized and the types of players that they could be. Whereas Deontay Johnson, I kind of view it as a wash, where you're taking on some risk that the target share isn't as high, but you're also getting a little bit more upside that, hey, what if he gets the same target share with a quarterback that isn't absolutely atrocious?
It feels like the case you made for Amon-Ra St. Brown, you can just make that same case for Deontay Johnson, but his floor is higher.
Yeah, I have Deontay ahead of Amon-Ra. To be clear, Amon-Ra is a much better value compared to where his ADP is. But I think Deontay, I'd probably have Deontay slightly ahead of Pittman and McLaurin.
Okay, the McLaurin thing's really interesting for me because if Wentz can somehow elevate his
same group,
it can elevate his catch rate, like on pure skill, and this is just from my non-scout eyes watching it. You watch Terry McLaurin, it seems like he's open every single play. Just drop it in there, let him go get it.
Yeah, the problem is Carson Wentz
sucks. Yes, I'm with you.
Like, that's just the issue. And as we said, like, that's fine because McLaurin's done it with guys who stink, but I don't think it's like, I think it's a lateral move at quarterback for him.
One of the things I enjoy about Carson Wentz to help my fantasy players, although his skill level may not be super high, and people will talk about the interception rate last year and how good it was, but how many times were you watching Colts games where the other team just dropped an interception from Carson Wentz that was thrown directly to them? It feels like it happened an awful lot. It felt like he ran hot on turnovers last year. However, one thing that he will do that a lot of quarterbacks will not do is just say, fuck it, I'm throwing it to you over there. I don't care if you're triple covered. You go up and get it. And McLaurin's the perfect type of guy for that.
Yeah, and I was alluding to this a little bit, but I do wonder if Wentz is a little bit better for McLaurin just because I think there's a bit more stability in his target share, where sometimes you get these bad quarterbacks in there and the efficiency numbers at the end of the day are very similar, but they have a tougher time trying to squeeze the ball to the playmakers. Like they'll look elsewhere. That's like a purely an educated guess from me. I don't know if that's true, but
there has to be
saying it might be true.
There has to be educated guesswork that goes into this. We're doing rankings. Like in your projections, you can model out, hey, here's the upside, here's the downside, here's the median. Here's how many plays we expect them to run. Here's who we expect to play. But when we're doing rankings and talking about who we're actually going to draft, you need to be able to sell yourself on some sort of concept that your player is going to be better than the pick that you have him at. There's a reason that he's going at the pick that you're taking him right now, and that's where the average draft position comes in. But if you can't sell yourself that he's going to be better than that pick, don't fucking take him.
Yeah. And Pittman, Deontay, McLaurin to me are really similar in terms of, I guess, how I'm viewing them, which is I think they're all basically fine, and I would take the cheapest of the group.
And it's funny because I would throw Cooks and Amari Cooper into that mix with those two as well. I think the Cooks' upside is plenty high, just based on the volume that he could see. And if Brissett is Brissett's not incompetent. He can throw to a guy and throw it to him down the field. That seems fine for him. I'd say Amari's floor is probably on the lower end than those guys.
Right.
And I'd probably agree with Pittman having the highest upside because maybe McLaurin has the highest upside of those guys, in my mind, by far. But after that, it would be Pittman because who knows? It's the glory of the unknown. Could he be even better than this? Maybe he's better than that. Or is he just a guy who's like 6 for 89 every week, which is great, but maybe that's his fate. Like fewer catches than Deontay Johnson, few more yards, same amount of touchdowns, and everything's a wash.
The film gurus love Michael Pittman so much. That's not my forte, but they really do like Michael Pittman.
Do they love Matt Ryan being the quarterback?
I think they just love Michael Pittman so much that they don't care. But I will say, I think that Matt Ryan was in a really unenviable situation last year, and Carson Wentz could be really, really bad in a lot of ways that, maybe there's a little bit more of a quarterback upgrade than we think here. But I just think some of that's neutered by the play calling where I don't know how much more it's going to matter, I guess.
So Gabriel Davis and Marquise Brown are the two that I don't have a part of this like lumped tier right now. You say you would put them in this tier, or would they be the beginning of the next tier?
I'm so confused what tier we're even on right now.
4. We're still on. We're still on.
We're still on 4.
Yeah, but okay. it's a big tier though. We had like micro tiers for the other one.
I would have Deontay Johnson in tier 4, and then I'd probably go to tier 5, and that's where I would have Gabriel Davis, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Hollywood Brown, and Allen Robinson.
And Cooks. I mean, Cooks is already he's locked into tier 4. He's
locked into tier 4. I know.
Let's be real here. So this tier currently looks like this, and we would probably have to break this up into 2 tiers. So let's do the roundabout: Debo, Deontay, DJ Moore, Mike Williams, Terry McLaurin, Brendan Cooks, Michael Pittman, Jalen Waddle, Amari Cooper, Gabriel Davis, Marquise Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Debo's the first one. The rest is open season on how we want to rank them. But that's the cluster of this tier right now. Do you think we should break that into 2, or do you think we should add more names into it and break it into 2? Because you still have DK Metcalf.
I think it would be
Rashad Bateman.
I would break it into 2 groups. I think Debo, Waddle, Moore. I think you got to break it into 2 groups. I probably, if you don't want to get too micro, I guess I'd probably cut it off after that trio of Pittman, Deontay, McLaurin for me.
I like McLaurin more than I like DJ Moore, so he's going up. He's going ahead of DJ Moore for me. So that leaves me with Deontay, Mike Williams, Brendan Cooks. Where does Mike Williams fit into this with these guys?
I'd put Mike Williams in that tier. I think for me, he should go at a similar cost as, Pittman and Deontay and McLaurin, but he's a different bat. Those 3 guys are similar to me, whereas Mike Williams is he's the home run bat, but you definitely don't have, the target floor that you do for these other guys in a full PPR league. That's going to basically make it really difficult for them to have bad seasons as long as they stay healthy.
So what was our bet again? It was Amari Cooper versus Chenault. That's what it was?
Oh, absolutely not.
Who was it? Amari Cooper versus who? Pittman?
No, it wasn't. Oh God, I don't even know who it was. Hollywood. It was Hollywood
versus Hollywood Brown. Okay.
Yeah.
So Debo, Waddle, McLaurin, DJ Moore. tier 4. That sound okay?
Yeah, I can do that.
So tier 5 would be, I got these 5 guys kind of lumped together here, and then I have the 3 below them. Deontay Johnson, Brendan Cooks, Amari Cooper, Michael Pittman, Mike Williams. Those 5. And then it would be like Gabriel Davis, Marquise Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Would be like the next little mini tier after that.
Yeah, I can jive with that.
I'll probably go Pittman. Do I want to go Cooper over Pittman? Yeah, I would take Cooper over Pittman. I know it's an ADP discussion at that point, but like Cooper's just going way later than Michael Pittman, but I don't really care. I'd rather have Deontay Johnson. I'd rather have Brendan Cooks. I'd rather have Mike Williams over Pittman too. I'm not anti-Pittman, but I think that's the order. So tier 5 will be Deontay Johnson, Brendan Cooks, Amari Cooper, Mike Williams, Michael Pittman. And then that brings us to tier 6. That's Gabriel Davis, Hollywood Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown. You said Allen Robinson. I don't want to put him in this tier. That leaves us with DK Metcalf, Rashad Bateman, Jerry Jeudy, Michael Thomas, Darnell Mooney Tunes. He's a part of that mix. Christian Kirk, I think you could probably throw in there. Adam Thielen is another one that I think deserves to be talked about of being in that tier. Whether or not they can make it there, I don't know.
What do you think about Sutton versus Jeudy?
I have no real lean on it. Like, I don't know. Like, do you have, like, can you sell me either way?
I think Jeudy is safer, like just the type of player he is. I think he's more likely to earn targets than Sutton, but Sutton definitely has, the big play vibes from Russ that get you really excited. And I went on that, rant about San Francisco, how they're tough because the upside's there, but individually it's gonna be tough for them all to hit ADP. Denver's certainly like that, where I think both Jeudy and Sutton should probably be in this next tier based on pure upside, even though I know it's really unlikely that both of them are going to be like beat their ADP or in line with their ADP end of season here. But I think when you're doing ranks, you want to factor in that ceiling that really moves the needle in fantasy. And I think both these guys have it.
How long until we have to talk about Treylon Burks or
Drake London?
Yeah,
the rookies.
Drake London, Devonta Smith I would throw in here as well.
You probably, so some of the guys you mentioned I would have left out. Like I don't know if Michael Thomas I don't think I really want much to do with Michael Thomas in this tier.
Yeah,
but he's down.
Okay,
London and Burks.
Okay, what about Brandon Ayuk?
I like him as a bounce back guy, but I still think this is too early. So I think the guys I would have next. So we talked about Gabe, Amon-Ra, Sutton, Jeudy, Juju. I would have in here. Metcalf.
Juju. Juju's gonna be right. I might put Juju in worst place in these rankings. Pass. Don't draft. I'm not going to even include him in the rankings, so people don't so people just think he's not in the league anymore.
I'm with you on Bateman. I think Mooney's at the very tail end of the tier.
I'm not sold on. I'm not sold on Mooney either. By the way, I think
he's overvalued.
I think I would rather have Alan Lazard than Darnell Mooney.
Okay, well that's ridiculous.
It's not ridiculous. Why? They're the number one in an offense. One guy has one of the best quarterbacks ever throwing him the ball. The other one has a guy who'd rather run.
You got to look at talent at some point. Alan Lazard, let's look at it's hard because we haven't seen him without Devontae
it's
Adams,
hard because
really.
We don't know, but of course, Darnell Mooney is a fucking superstar.
We're talking about a guy who's getting 12% target share. It's not like he was getting 18 and Devontae Adams is gone. He couldn't even crack the field to start the year. Alan Lazard is not it. Whereas Darnell Mooney, make a case for Darnell Mooney. I'm not a big Darnell Mooney fan, but he cleared 1K yards in an offense that was absolutely anemic. His target shares were really high for a guy who has a high ADA. I think he averaged a 26.5% target share last year. So, you can't compare Darnell Mooney and Alan Lazard. Get out of here.
Well, here's the thing. You don't need to compare them. I think that in terms of pure fantasy scoring, I think Lazard outscores Darnell Mooney, and they're currently going 40 picks apart.
Yeah, because they should be going 40 picks apart.
They should not be going 40 picks apart. Now,
I
don't know how much higher Lazard should be going, but Mooney should not be going at pick 58.
Yeah. I mean, 58 is too early for Mooney. I'll agree with you there, but Alan Lazard's going to get out targeted by Sammy Watkins, dude. I mean, he just doesn't have it.
Do you want to make that bet? Targets for this season? Watkins versus Lazard?
Can I get a
no
Sammy
insurance?
Watkins makes the team. If they're both on the day one roster, Sammy Watkins will out target Alan Lazard.
Okay, I will give you your provision that he has to make the team first because he's so good. Make the team first. All right.
I don't have Sammy Watkins ranked ahead of Alan Lazard, but I think if he's there, he's gonna out target him.
You talked about the Denver guys. I'm seeing a lot of Twitter buzz about Tim Patrick. He's so like, you want to talk about a guy who's maybe the best receiver in football, according to some people? Tim Patrick.
It depends which group of people. There's a group of people that thinks Tim Patrick's the best wide receiver in football, and there's a group of people that I'm admitting my bias and a part of that just likes to pretend Tim Patrick doesn't exist and will go away when time and time again we've seen that that's not the case and he will not go away. I mean, he's nowhere near this tier, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think he's here. I'm just kind of throwing out names.
He's pesky though, but he's pesky. Like that's the tough part with Denver. I like Albert O. You know, I'm not on this KJ Hamler train that a lot of people are on. I don't really see that happening. But even still, it's a little bit dicey for a team that we don't know what the play calling is going to be like.
But Mike, KJ Hamler's almost as fast as Troy Williamson. How couldn't he be good?
I'm not falling into the KJ Hamler trap.
The other one I wanted to throw out because I'm just, and this is probably a discussion for part 3 of this when we break down the next tier of guys, but Hunter Renfrow. Why does everyone just assume he sucks now?
I think Renfrow is in the next tier, but I seem to like Renfrow more than a lot of people. This is an offense. Okay, so this is where I could be wrong. And I hit on this in part 1 with Devontae Adams. But I think even though there's 3 guys here that command a lot of targets, I think they're going to be the 3 guys. Like Renfrow, Adams, and Waller, if they combine for 70% of the team's targets, they're going to be okay, you know? And then they do have some upside if one of the other 2 gets hurt, which is like a 20% chance that one of the other 2 gets hurt, you know? Like, and I think Las Vegas is going to be a fun offense. I think they're going to throw a decent bit. I think Derek Carr is a little bit underrated. So I think Renfro's fine. I'd have him in the next tier, but I'm definitely not anti Renfrow.
A lot of the names that we've kind of propped up, like that tier with the Deontay Johnson, tier 5, Brendan Cooks, isn't Jacoby Myers just like the Bush League version of that?
Of
like
Renfrow?
That? No, yeah, like I mean, that's how we're like. I would say that Renfrow is a very similar comp to Jacoby Myers this year. Obviously, Hunter Renfrow was way better than that a year ago, but now Devontae Adams comes in. Of course, he can no longer be good anymore. But the way that we talked about like the huge target share, high catch rate type players, Jacoby Myers is that type of player.
Yeah, and he was the guy that was really undervalued last draft season where his targets per out run was so high and the opportunity was there. And that's sort of how to use targets per out run is when a guy has a high targets per out run and then you can see and make a case that his routes are going to increase as well. I think sometimes it's overutilized for guys whose routes just aren't changing. And then it's like, well, that doesn't matter. For him, it did matter. And he jumped to 126 targets, which was solid. I think he can do the same this year. I think they're going to throw the ball more in Mac Jones' second year. They also had a game in which they only threw the ball 3 times last year that really hurt the overall numbers.
Sure, but I think that when you look at the external circumstances of that game, that makes sense.
It makes sense, but it's not something that we like if you're just viewing their pass rate last year and you're not stripping out that game, you're shorting them on their expected pass rate.
Sure, but I think you'd be doing yourself a disservice if you didn't strip out that game, as it's a once every 15-year outlier game. It was like that.
That's what I'm saying.
It's like that Miami-Pittsburgh game on Monday night in like 2007 or something where it was 6-6.
Maybe I misworded. I'm agreeing with you. I think if you strip out that game, their pass rate's like 3 percentage points higher already. And then I think they're going to throw a little bit more on top of that because of Mac Jones. So that's like a pro Myers point where I think if people are looking at just pure fantasy points, which, the market's better about not judging players purely off fantasy points per game from the previous season. But with Jacoby Myers, the combination of the team's pass rate being really low last year and just him continuing to run really bad in touchdowns, like has people too low on him. And I'm not expecting him to all of a sudden regress and like score 8 touchdowns, but when you've only scored 2 touchdowns, it really just cannot get that much worse.
That was my fault. I misunderstood what you had said in the first place. I think you were actually very clear about it, but I twisted my mind so I could yell and argue about it. No, you're completely right about that. Here are some guys right now, DraftKings, Jacoby Myers going at pick number 139 overall. Here are the equivalent wide receivers he's going around. Tim Patrick, Jamison Williams, his teammate Devontae Parker, that'll be great for 2 games, Van Jefferson, DJ Chark, Jahan Dotson, Alec Pierce. Like, he's better than those guys. He really is.
Yeah. We have him ranked higher than all of those guys.
He's going behind Kenny Golladay and Rondell Moore.
Especially in full PPR. Listen, I like Kenny Golladay and Rondell Moore, so that's where I draw the line.
Of course you do.
But the rest of those guys, I think you should be going ahead of.
Can I take my ADOT versus Rondell Moore's ADOT this year and I have a 50-50 chance of winning?
Yeah, but you have a 0% chance of catching 80 balls.
That's true. 80 balls for 74 yards.
PPR formats, baby.
Yeah, killing it. All right, so let's circle back to this tier before we get into here. Gabe Davis, Hollywood Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I like Amon-Ra St. Brown the best of those 3 guys, to be perfectly honest with you. If it's me talking, but you're here to help me with my ranking, so I don't look foolish.
I think that's fine. I probably have Hollywood first, but I would have Hollywood ahead, but I think Amon-Ra is right at the top of that tier. Where are we putting Juju in the tier?
Oh, he's not being. Juju shall be unranked. He's not going in the rankings. Okay. He sucks. But
I'd probably go Hollywood, Amon-Ra, Gabe Davis.
Okay, that's the order that I have him in right now. Hollywood Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Gabriel Davis. We didn't. Maybe this is what we can do in part 3. Talk about DeAndre Hopkins. Talk about Michael Thomas, Olave,
Godwin,
Jarvis Landry. Godwin's another one because Godwin. You could put Godwin in that tier with like Michael Pittman if you really wanted to, but now it's looking like he might go to PUP, might not even be back for week 5, and it's Tampa. If they start out okay and they're not 0-4, like what incentive do they have to rush any of these guys back? They don't give a shit about the regular season.
Yeah, he's really tough. I wish I knew what was going to happen. You wish you knew what happened with every player, but with him in particular, because if he's fully healthy, he's going in like rounds that like the 2-3 turn this year if he's fully healthy, which he's not, but if he is, like that's the type of player you're getting. So if you're missing 4 weeks, it's like who cares? But if you're missing 5 to 6 weeks and then he's getting worked in for another 2 weeks, that's going to be a problem.
I think we can have a discussion about the injured guys, the Jets receivers, who everyone seems to like one of them, different one it seems like, and then how much do you really want to commit? Because there's one guy in every draft who just loves one of the Jets receivers, and they all seem to have sort of this weird inflated value. And I would like to add to this tier 6, like Thielen, Metcalf, and maybe one of the injured guys gets in there. Sutton and Judy, you mentioned.
Yeah.
Is it time for Allen Robinson? Is it time for Darnell Mooney? Is it time for Rashad Bateman and Hunter Renfrow? Or maybe this is just a little mini tier, and maybe we throw in the injured guys either in this tier or just after this tier, and then go on from there. But I think we're pretty good here. Let's get to the ranks. Here's what we've built so far. You want to hear them?
Let's hear them.
Tier 1. Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. Tier 2, Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, and CeeDee Lamb. I have Stefon Diggs still. I haven't thought about putting him in tier 2 or tier 3. So he's either the last guy, he's number 7 in the rankings, but he's either in tier 2 or tier 3 with T. Higgins, A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill, and Keenan Allen. Then we go Deebo Samuel, Jalen Waddle, Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore as a part of tier 4. Deontay Johnson, Brendan Cooks, Amari Cooper, Mike Williams, Michael Pittman as a part of tier 5. And then tier 6 is Hollywood Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Gabriel Davis. And we may add to that tier as we go on with the next show. But that's where we stand at the moment in building these tiers. We did pretty good.
If we take out our quarterback detour, and we were a little more on point this week.
We were. And we talked like 20 more wide receivers as well. We just haven't ranked them yet. We're getting there.
The wheels are spinning though.
We're getting there. This is fun. Hey, if this is going to cost me an hour every week where I get to talk to you and argue about this, I'm having a good time.
That's also room for another bet.
That's true. So we have 2 so far. Do we have 3? Lazard versus Watkins.
One per show. Oh, I guess we have 3. I forgot the Lazard versus Watkins bet. Yeah.
Who did I take Cooks against you with? Was that against Hollywood Brown too?
No. Cooks was
it Cooks versus Davis?
I think it was Cooks that's what you did with
Herzig. Yeah.
With Herzig. I took Juju.
Yeah, Cooks versus Juju. I got to write all these down. I need some sort of like running.
So Cooks,
I might need a running tracker behind me on the wall for all these bets I'm making. I made one with Sealy too. I completely forget what it is.
Cooks, Juju, Lazard, Watkins, and Hollywood Cooper.
Yeah, and it's Lazard versus Watkins in targets.
Yeah.
Where did I have? Do I have the Jake one? Is that still open? No, it's Cuss Corner. Yeah, there's a new Cuss Corner coming out soon. It involves, if you went to a gym, Mike, would you expect there to be javelin and discus there?
No, absolutely not.
No, that would be insane, right?
That would be weird. That would be weird. I'm not like a huge gym guy, but any gym I've gone to, I don't think I mean, if you went to like a track and field clinic, I'd expect it to be there.
Sure. But. Yeah, absolutely. Not where they have like elliptical machines.
Right. No, that's super weird. I'm assuming Cuss thinks that should be part of the common gym equipment.
Because it would be so popular. All those people who love throwing discus.
How big does he think a gym is? Are we talking like a virtual discus?
Well,
where's he going to throw it?
Yes. So this was the first thing I said to him. Besides the cost, like, where are you getting the space for this? And then he was like, oh, no, it's like a golf simulator, but for discus. It's like, okay, that sounds very unprofitable.
But at the same time, that is the only way it would actually work and make sense.
And then he was talking about how, like, you go to, like, I'm sure
javelin just gonna go through the screen.
Yeah.
It's just,
well, you know how you can go to golf simulator bars?
We're gonna get javelin discus bar.
That's what he was starting to talk about. It's like, I don't think golf is one thing. I don't think you can trust people with discs. Like, to throw a discus, you're twirling around and launching it. And then a javelin has a very pointy end. I don't think there's enough insurance in the world to trust drunk people around that.
No. That's horrible ideas from Cuss.
This idea is very bad. Mike Leone, at 2 Hats, 1 Mike on the Twitter machine. You've been doing a bunch of really cool shows at ETR. I like your you versus Silva shows. They're fun.
The man versus machine. Silva and I definitely have a good time going at it. He's got his top 150 against what the pure projections we do on the back end do. So sometimes we come to an agreement, but other times I just make Silva look foolish. So definitely check that out.
How often does that happen that you make him look foolish, would you say? Versus times he makes you look foolish?
I guess it depends if you're talking objective reality or from my perspective.
From your perspective. The truth. Your truth. You just live it.
Oh, I think I win 3 out of 4 against Silva.
75% hit rate's Silva. Not bad. That's really good, actually. In your own mind, you can't even be winning 100% of the time. That's sad, man. Those are your medium projections coming in. That's why you're a computer. You just don't have that overabundance of confidence that you need. Just 100% of the time, never lose. That's the way you need to talk. Lion mentality, Mike.
I don't have the Davis Maddock blind confidence and inability to process probabilities and just round up to 100.
Okay, maybe you should. I also work off the Davis theory of I'm always right. Don't worry about it. Despite the results telling me that's not the case. But against you in bets, 100% winner.
That's actually, sadly for me, true so far. 0 for 2 last year. So.
Well, you have a chance to get back above 500 against me here if you win all 3 of these bets.
I'm excited for it. These are like Lock City.
You said that last year, Odell Beckham. Give your head a shake.
Oh, God.
Just remember, you got your money in good, according to you, on Odell Beckham Jr. and Laviska Shenault.
All right, the Shenault one was an obvious mistake. Odell, I'm blaming him. He just let me down.
Yeah, but you thought that Shenault was awesome last year.
I didn't think he was awesome. I didn't think he was as bad as you thought he was.
Well, you thought he was worse than Marv Jones.
All right. Well, that's you though. You pull this on me. You get me sometimes with these guys that I will admit might have better median projections, but when my guys win, they're gonna blow your guys out of the water, and I'm just gonna dance over your grave.
Sure. I mean, there's no extra payment. We're not on one of these sites where
I know we need a progressive.
Yeah,
bet,
like where you get
like
multipliers
$1 per point.
Oh, you want? Okay, now that's a different story. Those are not the bets that we're making here, sir.
We should be making those bets. That's what I need to switch up. $1 per point.
All right, so we need to get some sort of progressive point differential, and that's the cost of the bet. Hey, if you want to propose those bets, I need to process them. I need to listen to them, but I might be on board for something like that.
All right, next time I'll propose it.
Next time on the Pat Mayo Experience, we'll talk about 5 more receiver rankings for 2 straight hours and weird bets that we're going to forget about in 3 weeks until it becomes this time next year. And we're like, what were the bets that we made again? And then we'll have to think about it. Then it'll be dead air. And then people will lie about the bets that we made. Either way, it'll be good times. Like I said, check out Mike on EstablishTheRun.com. ETR at 2 hats. For the French people out there, Mac on Twitter, or 2 hats, 1 Mike on Twitter if you are the Anglais. Me, I'm the PME. Go back, check out the other shows down in the description. Draft kit's completely free. We already have 8 or 9 shows up already. This is part 2 of the receivers. We'll have part 3. Part 2 of the running backs is coming very soon with Jake Seeley. Thank you all for watching. Smash a like on the way out. I'll see you next time.
Mayo Experience! Experience!